So as we're reviewing here for our Unit 3 test, I want to make sure that we go back over and review this production function stuff. And so this paper is available for you there in the agenda, but at the same time, if you would like, feel free to print it off for yourself or draw it out yourself just so that you can work along, or if you just want to watch along with and make sure you're tracking with it and understand. But it's really good to get the math practice behind all this, and that's really what I want to make sure that we do today. So let's start off going through this together. What I'm going to encourage you to do along the way is at different points to pause the video so that you can maybe work through it and then go straight through the answers along with us. So here we have it set up. This is how you might see it set up on a test or something similar. And what we want to do is we want to go to these first two columns, our total product and our marginal product. And so going into these, what we want to start off with doing is our marginal product. And what we need to remember is what exactly is our formula for our marginal product? Well, it's just our change in our total product. And so every time you see that delta, just remember the delta just means change in. So as we kind of zoom back to this, let's think about this marginal product and what that is. Obviously, we're not going to have anything in this first blank, but when we go from there, as we go from 0 up to 4 of our product, what's the change? Well, the change is 4. Well, when we go from 4 up to something, the change is 5. So what would that be? Well, 4 and then a change of 5, that results in a 9. So we can jot 9 in there. Then going from 9 up to 16, we see that the change is 7. 16 up to 25, the change in total product is 9. We have the same thing as above, wherever we go from 25 to something, we go up by 4. So we go up to 29. And then 29 up to 31 is 2. 31 up to something has a change of 1, so we know that's 32, right? Because 31 to 32 is just a change in 1. But then we notice something we might not have seen before. The change here is -2, and the change here is -3. And those can be negative, just so you know we can see that. Now going from there, we want to go ahead and look at what would happen in that next column with total product. And so one thing to keep in mind with total product is I am always going to provide you guys with the information that you need for total product. And so if you notice down at the bottom right here, we say, okay, it's going to be 200 plus $80 per worker. So what we're saying there is that 200 is our fixed cost, and then $80 is our variable cost. It's the cost that will change with the number of workers that we have. So obviously we know that even if we hire 0 workers, we are going to still have that $200 in expenses that are fixed no matter what. We're always going to have that $200. But from there, what we do is we add $80 per worker. So obviously, when we go from 0 worker up to 1 worker, we're going to have another $80 in cost on top of that $200. So we're going to have a cost of $280. So go ahead and pause right now and see if you can work the rest of the way down. Well, if we were to work our way down, what we would end up seeing is that we would just kind of be plugging this into a formula. We don't have to plug it in the formula, but it's the same idea, where we would say total cost is equal to that $200 plus $80, and we'll say W. W will be like our X, but it stands for workers. So as that W changes, it's going to change our total cost. So as we plug 2 workers, or 2W into that, what we would have $360. And then when we have 3 workers, when we plug a 3 into that W, it would end up being 440. I'm just going to keep going through these. So we would have 520. From there, we would have 600, 680, 760, 840, and then finally we would have 920. All right, so that's our total cost. That's the total amount we have to spend to produce however many of this product we're making. Let's say, just for simplicity's sake, let's say we're making like backpacks. Okay, we'll call that our product. So as we talk through this, we'll use the term backpack. All right, let's go on to marginal cost. Now remember we said marginal cost can be a little bit tricky sometimes, but we have to just go in and think about what our formula is. Remember, when we think marginal, we're thinking additional. So we're saying the additional cost, but it's the additional cost per product. So we have to say, okay, what is our change in our total cost? But we divide that by the change in our total product because we want to know what's the change in our total cost, but just for each additional backpack, right? So for whatever that change in total product is, we have to factor that in. And again, remember this is also just our marginal product. It's actually the same thing. I like doing the change in total over change in total just because it makes a little bit more sense. But let's zoom on back. And we're not going to have anything in this first one, by the way. And just a little note, whenever you guys see that these are negative down here, we're actually going to have nothing for those either because you can't have a negative cost. So negative cost is like you're getting paid money, and that's not what's happening there. So just you can ignore those just so that you know. And we're just going to fill in those boxes in between the dashes. So when we look at this first one, remember we're going to kind of take those steps as we jump from one thing to the next to the next. And let's start off where what is our change in our total product? And so we're saying when we go from a total product of 0 up to 4, and we have a total cost that goes from 200 to 280. So our change in our total cost is $80 divided by our change in our total product, which is 4. So 80 divided by 4, our marginal cost here is going to be $20. Well, what about this next one? Our total product is going up by 5, right? It's going from 4 up to 9. And our total cost is changing by 80 once again. So we would do 80 divided by 5, and we get 16. So see if, again, if you can pause the video and work the rest of the way down on these. So if we're to keep going with this pattern here, wherever we are doing our change in our total cost divided by our change in our total product, if you notice every single time our total cost is changing by 80. So it's always going to be 80 that is on top, right? So when we're doing total change in total cost over change in total product, 80 is always going to be on top. And then that change is always just going to be whatever our marginal product is, right? Because that's already our change in our total product. So if we go to this next one, we would do 80 divided by 7. And 80 divided by 7 is $11.43. Next, we would do 80 divided by 9, and 80 divided by 9 is $8.89. Next, we would go to, once again, 80 divided by 4, and we know from earlier that that's going to be $20. Then we go from there, 80 divided by 2, that's going to be $40. Then this next one is going to be 80 divided by 1, that's $80. And then again, we can ignore these last two down here. All right, so that's marginal cost. Make sure you guys remember that formula, and you're really key on that. You're really key in on that. So let's look at marginal revenue. What do we say exactly marginal revenue is? Well, remember, just keep in mind that it's just our selling price, right? We said that marginal revenue is just the additional money that we bring in per backpack that we sell. And so each additional backpack we bring in, we're also bringing in $42 for selling it. So that means the selling price is just $42. That'll come in handy later. But whenever we talk about total revenue, remember we said that our formula for total revenue is going to be that selling price, so that marginal revenue, and we're going to multiply that by our total product. So we're saying, all right, how much are we selling it for, right? How much are we selling it for times what's the number of them that we're selling, okay? And so that's how we find our total revenue. Our total revenue is just the total amount of money that's going into our cash register at the end of the day. So obviously, if our total product is equal to 0, we are not making any backpacks. Our revenue is also going to be 0. We have absolutely nothing there. But let's go on to this next one. This next one, if you notice, we make 4 backpacks and we sell each one for $42. Well, 4 times 42 is 168. So go ahead and pause here and see if you can work the rest of the way down. Again, as we go, we're always just multiplying by 42 because that's our selling price each time. So we're taking that $42 selling price and multiplying it by the total amount of backpacks that we're producing. So next we would go and do $42 times the 9 backpacks that we make, and that is going to be $378. From there we do 16 times 42, and 16 times 42 is going to be $672. From there we do 25 times 42, and we get $10.50. Then we do 29 times 42, and we get $1,218. Then we do 31 times 42, and we get 1,302. 32 times 42 is going to be 1,344, and then we get 1,260, and finally 1,134. Now again, we would be tempted to look at this and say, well, we maximize or like we should, hire 7 workers because we look here and that's where we make the most amount of money. But remember, we don't care about revenue as much as we care about how much money we get to go home with at the end of the day. And that amount of money that we get to go home with at the end of the day is what we call profit. And so when we think about profit, last formula you need to remember profit is when we take our total revenue, the total amount of money that we make, and we subtract our total costs. And that leaves us with how much money do we get to take home at the end of the day after we pay all of the bills. So total revenue minus total cost. So let's finish this one up. Whenever we have our profit on this first one, we make $0 in total revenue. We still had to pay $200, so our profit is actually negative 200. Remember, always include these negative signs if they exist. From there, we have we have $168 in revenue, and we subtract our cost of $280, and we get negative $112. From there, we do 378 minus 360, and we get the first time we break even, we go positive $18. So go ahead and see if you can work the rest of these down. All right, so if we were to go the rest of the way down from 18, we would have 232, which is 672 minus 440. And then 1050 minus 520 is going to be 530. Then we have 618, 622, 584, 420, and 214. Now, here comes the big question. How many workers should we hire? And I had always told you guys that we obviously we're trying to maximize profit. And so a lot of you guys are probably looking here and you're like, well, the biggest profit is this one right here where we make $622. And you're absolutely right. But remember, I said that if you say because 622 is the biggest, you would be wrong. I would mark you wrong. And again, we have to understand the why. So when you talk about the why here, we want to look at this whole marginal cost and marginal revenue thing. And the reason we want to look there is because marginal cost is the additional cost to produce one more backpack. Marginal revenue is the additional money we bring in for selling that backpack. And what is true about this point right here where we hire 6 workers? Well, what's true is that this is the last time, if we were to kind of do like our, greater than less than, if we notice our marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost all the way through here. But once we get there, the sign switches direction. And so we don't want to go to this point. We do not want to go up to 7 workers because we start to lose money. Anywhere past 7 workers, we start to lose money. You guys can see that because our profit is starting to go down. And so that's why we say we would hire 6 workers, because it is the last time that we see that our marginal cost is still below our marginal revenue. So we get as close as we can to those two things being equal without going over.